Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I want to talk to you about the world's biggest gaming company, and what's neat about this company is it's not one that you've probably ever heard of, or if you have heard this name, you've almost certainly never thought of it as being a big company. We gamers all know about huge companies like Activision, EA, Ubisoft, Nintendo, etc., but what if I told you there was a gaming company so big, so massive, that it had the assets to buy all four of those companies several times over, and then still have enough money left over to buy Tesla Motors. As a matter of fact, this company is so huge in scale that there's almost a 0% chance you haven't played one of their games, even though you may not have ever heard their name. Fun fact, the game we're looking at right now, Fortnite, is owned by this company, so if you've played Fortnite, you're definitely in on that train. And it's so huge that it totally eclipses the gaming market and the software market, and it breaks into being one of the biggest companies in the entire world. Before I do the big reveal, I want you to take a minute just to think about it. Think about big companies that you've heard of. What are the biggest, most valuable, richest companies in the world? Names like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Walmart, or JP Morgan Chase Bank might come to mind, but there's a Chinese company out there that's not really in the minds of most Western businessmen or gamers, and that company is Tencent. As of today, Tencent is the 5th largest company in the world. Yes, I said that correctly. They're not just a big company. They're not a top 10 big company. They're a top 5 big company. They're the 5th biggest company in the world and one of the fastest growing companies in the world. Tencent is a Chinese gaming and app company that's exploded in wealth up to about $500 billion as of Q1 2018. And the gaming and apps and software services are the backbone of their revenue, but they're also a big investment and holding firm, one of the biggest in the world, and the amount of things that they own is going to blow your mind before the end of this video. Tencent right now is bigger than ExxonMobil, the oil conglomerate, Facebook, Wells Fargo banks, General Electric, Disney, including all that Star Wars and Marvel stuff, Coca-Cola, AT&T, Samsung, Intel, Nike, Toyota, just to name a few. As a matter of fact, it could probably afford to buy most of those companies a couple times over. And if this video isn't crazy enough, let's just go ahead and get started on what Tencent owns just for video games. We're going to talk about all the other crazy assets, but let's look at just the video games that they own. They own 100% of Riot Games, which is League of Legends, and it may not be in its heyday anymore, but it's still the most played game in the world with roughly 100 million active players monthly. And by in the world, I don't just mean North America. I mean, it's the biggest game in North America, South America, Europe, all of Asia. It's still the juggernaut in the gaming industry, even though its growth is kind of capped out just because there's a population limit on the planet, I assume. It owns 40% of Epic Games, and that's Fortnite, Unreal, Gears of War, and anything licensed by the Unreal Engine. So if you've played League of Legends or Fortnite, the two biggest, most popular free-to-play games in the entire world, you've played a Tencent game. Tencent owns 100% of PUBG Mobile, which is an enormous app right now. It has the exclusive Chinese distribution rights for PUBG in China, and it has some other investments as well into Bluehole and into the PUBG Corporation. For those of you on the mobile side of things, if you play Clash of Clans, you should know that Tencent owns a majority stake, or more than 50% of Supercell, the developer and publisher of that one. Recently, Tencent bought 5% of Activision Blizzard. Along with that deal, they get exclusive distribution rights and revenue from some of the games that they sell in China. So if you've played Call of Duty, Destiny, or Overwatch, you've played a game that Tencent's definitely had a hand in making. They also bought 5% of Ubisoft, which would include Far Cry, Rainbow Six, and Assassin's Creed. And this is going to be kind of an oddball one, but they bought 21% of a small company called Glue Mobile. They make a lot of very casual mobile games that us hardcore gamers probably wouldn't play, but a ton of people still do, like Kim Kardashian Hollywood, Deer Hunter, Design Home, and MLB Tap Sports Baseball. So while I haven't played these games, I assure you that a lot of people have. Some of the more curious investments that Tencent has made is that they bought Orcs Must Die. They also bought Miniclip, which owns about 20 or 30 online flash game properties. Pretty much any popular viral free online game Tencent owns. That's going to include Bloons, Plague Inc., or Agario. And interestingly, the only work they do with EA is licensing. So as far as I'm aware, they don't own any of EA, but in order for EA to distribute FIFA, their biggest and most profitable title across the entire world in China, they have to do it through Tencent. So Tencent gets a big cut of FIFA FIFA in China, which is about as much work as EA is ever going to do in China. So that's part one of what Tencent owns, and respectfully, it's kind of the smaller part. This is about to get so much crazier. But for those of you that are curious as to why so many companies license games through Tencent in China, it's because they have very strong ties to the government and the censor board, and because the way the Chinese copyright laws are set up and even your license to distribute in the country, it really helps to do it through a Chinese company. A lot of US companies have tried this tactic of they'll make a subsidiary in China and they'll pay one guy to sit there and do some paperwork and be Chinese so that he can sue if the game gets stolen or copied, but that doesn't work very well, and in a lot of times just direct foreign distribution of games gets outright denied. But if you go through Tencent and do a partnership or a licensing agreement through Tencent, you can sell your product in China, and that's a huge marketplace of over 1 billion rapidly increasing in wealth people, and that's definitely a market you want to be in. So Tencent kind of gets a cut of every little bit of foreign business that goes on in China. So if you've played a few video games in the last 5 years, one of them was almost certainly a Tencent game. But if you think that's crazy, you should see some of the stakes they've bought into in other companies in the United States. They own 12% of Snapchat, 5% of Tesla Motors, which, by the way, guys, Tencent, if you're listening, my Tesla's damaged right now. If you want to send me a free one for all of this shameless building up of your brand, you can find my business email on my Twitter. Spotify, they own 10% of. They own Skydance Media, which produces movies like Annihilation, Star Trek Beyond, Mission Impossible, World War Z. They have licensing deals with HBO, so that HBO is distributed in China through Tencent. The National Basketball Association, or NBA, is the same kind of thing, distributed in China through Tencent. And they're working with L'Oreal, the cosmetics company, on some digital advertising experiments, is a better way to say it. But it's shocking that they've been able to buy that much of Western companies outside of their main technological and gaming backbone. Speaking of which, you're probably wondering right now how in the world it is this company called Tencent that you may be just learning about today got all the money to buy into these companies. Well, they started building their wealth with QQ Chat and later WeChat. As of right now, WeChat has 938 million monthly users, so we'll just call it 1 billion users to keep it simple, and the Chinese government helped play a huge role in Tencent's growth. Companies like Google and Facebook and Apple had restricted abilities to do business, especially online business, search engines, chat apps, and things like that in China, because the Communist Party has different rules regarding public communications. Also, part of their 5-year plan from 2011 to 2015 was a huge push for e-commerce. Tencent got the biggest benefit from this, in that they got direct support from the government, and they were able to develop WeChat and QQ Chat along with that to grow into massive platforms. As of right now, Tencent owns both the number 1 and the number 2 chat apps for all of China, which is approximately a 1.3 billion person market, maybe 1.4 now, I can hardly keep track, and that has insane value. They were able to leverage that to make smart investments into Riot Games, into Fortnite and PUBG and other, like Activision, Ubisoft, and other Western entities, along with a lot of local investments that are just downright shocking. As for how they got the licensing deals to do FIFA through EA or HBO or Call of Duty Online, that's because the Chinese government also has fairly strict rules and regulations about foreign media. Only a certain number of foreign films or foreign video games can be released in the country each year. They have to apply by the Communist Party's censor guidelines, which aren't as bad as they used to be, but a few strange issues may come up. And on top of that, they have a completely different copyright law system than we do. What US companies used to do when they wanted to sell a product in China is they would make a small subsidiary in China and hire a staff of like 3 to 5 Chinese people, and their job would be to sit there, to be the head of the Chinese subsidiary and be Chinese, so that when you sued for somebody stealing your intellectual property or violation of copyright, it would be one Chinese citizen suing another, but it just didn't work very well. The way to launch a product in China and have it protected and to make profit is to do it through a partnership with a Chinese company like Tencent. Because if Tencent, that has close ties to the government and is a massive and influential corporation, is distributing your intellectual property, it will be protected, whereas if you do it on your own, it may not. So if you're an American company and you want to sell your digital goods or software or video games in China, you probably need to go through Tencent or another company like it. So with the money that they've earned in China, they invested wisely, and they invested overseas and got a return on investment there. and they have done some really insane investments in China, and I think this is the part where the video just goes completely off the rails. They own Tencent Pictures, which if you've seen Kong Skull Island or Wonder Woman, you've seen a Tencent picture. They own Didi Dash, God, I hope I'm saying that right. I can't pronounce it for beans, but it's essentially the Chinese version of Uber, the ride-sharing app. It's worth about $700 million just unto itself, because Uber's legal capacity to do business in China is more limited. They have their own version. They have Tenpay, which is very similar to PayPal and used all throughout China. If you don't think that's crazy enough, they own Tenbank, an actual bank, so you can link your Tencent-owned bank to your Tencent-owned PayPal to take a trip on your Tencent-owned Uber. They have a platform called Tencent Games Platforms, roughly how it translates, and that has 200 million users, which doesn't seem that big, but Steam, the biggest gaming platform in the world that most of you are familiar with, only has 125 million users. They own Tencent Music, which is the biggest music streaming service in China. They recently traded with Spotify 10% equity in each company, so they now own 10% of Spotify, and Spotify owns 10% of Tencent Music. They own Sogyo.com, man, I hope I'm pronouncing that one correctly, which is a large Chinese search engine, which is, they have a minority stake in it, but they still have a say. JD.com, which is a competitor to Alibaba, which is similar to the Chinese version of Amazon. They own their own e-commerce platform, which is a lot of e-commerce technology and link tracking and paying taxes and shopping carts and that sort of tech. They own a company called Lot Synergy, which is a Chinese lottery company. So they own the bank, the PayPal, and the lottery company. A lot of money transactions going on here. They own a Chinese startup called NIO, which is an electric vehicle company and has a strategic partnership with Tesla, or at least Tencent has a strategic investment in electric vehicles moving forward into the future. They've diversified into AI cars, self-driving drones, and electric airplanes. And the craziest things that I have ever heard of in my life is they currently just got permission to build an esports city. They got the license from the city prefecture of Wuhu to build an esports city. And I want you to think about this. This is going to be an esports city with skyscrapers and public transit and trains. It's probably going to have 5, 10, 15 million plus people living in it and have the express purpose of being the world's esports and gaming hub. Everything's going to be fiber top to bottom, and it's going to be like a gaming mecca or utopia. And the fact that they have the money and the permission from the Chinese government to do that blows my mind. On top of an esports themed theme park in Chengdu, which I don't even know how you're going to make an esports theme park, but they're going to do it, and it's just insane. So in 5 years from now, if you live in China, you could live in the esports city of Wuhu, which Tencent roughly owns the majority of. You could wake up and use a Tencent search engine to decide if you want to see a movie, travel in a Tencent Uber to a Tencent-produced movie, pay with the Tencent Tenpay app, which you get money from your Tencent bank. On the way to the theater, you could listen to Tencent music streaming through your phone and talk to your friends about the movie you saw using either WeChat or QQ Chat, which is a Tencent-owned app. Get home, order some food and supplies via the Tencent version of Amazon, log on to the Tencent version of Steam, which is the Tencent gaming platform, and play a Tencent-owned video game using yet another Tencent-owned chat app. So the size and scale and influence of this company is mind-blowing in ways that don't even make sense to me. And I think it's time we start giving them the credit and respect that they're due, or more accurately, just at least acknowledge that all these other companies that we thought were big, we thought Activision was the big player. We thought EA bought games and killed them. We thought Ubisoft made a whole bunch of games. We thought that Microsoft and Sony were the big players in the hardware industry. All of that is a joke compared to Tencent. Tencent is insanely huge, powerful, and influential, and they're going to grow even more. I would wager that in 3 years' time, they're going to break top 3 most valuable companies on the planet. And yeah, that's it for this video. Just something I wanted you to be aware of. My mind is reeling right now after doing the commentary. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. And if you did, don't forget to share this video with your friends. Drifter out.